But there's no doubt that even as you're referring to most of the crises taking place in the north, of course that is a fact, but there's no doubt that this can easily metastasize and trickle right down into the south, not so?
Well, I have said there's no overnight solution to the problem. The problems are multifaceted. We have to look at restructuring, and the restructuring has to equally involve our institutions. I'm telling you, Ajuri, our federal government is too bogus. It's too big. Because it's too big, it's distracted. The federal government needs to narrow its responsibility primarily to security so that it can be effective in that area. Right now, with the structure we have in place, we have a federal government that is jack of all trades and master of none. That is why we are where we are right now today.
In your view, state governments, subnational governments, whether state or local, are prepared, in your mind, to take up the responsibilities of their own internal security?
Well, the security will be more effective if we have more boots on the ground. There are over 1.5 million law enforcement officers in the United States. And we are maybe roughly a little above half the population of the United States. But we don't have even anything close to half of that number of law enforcement personnel. We need more boots on the ground. That is the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is that you cannot have 350,000 policemen and you ask them to go and police 180 million, 200 million. We don't even know our population. You ask them to go and police them. They can't do it. You're asking them to do magic, and they're not magicians, so they cannot do it. So the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, more boots on the ground is needed, whether they come from the state or they come from the federal. But we need more personnel, period.
What are your thoughts on this kind of debate that's taking place about quality versus quantity? You know, some people have said the answer, like you've said, is more boots on the ground. We've heard recently from the Minister of Interior that we're going to get 6,000 new policemen in the country. But if they're not effectively trained, if they're not effectively equipped or effectively recruited, are we really solving the problem? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that is why people say that we should have state police, because the federal government can't do it alone. If we have, say, 800,000 policemen and women, the federal government may not be able to shoulder that responsibility on its own. So if the responsibility is broken down and devolved to the various levels of government, the bulk of taking care of those law enforcement officers will be shared. The burden will be shared by all levels of government. That is why you see people who are calling for state police are doing so. And I give you one typical example. In my home state of Imo right now, my governor, Governor Rochas Okrocha, is building ultra-modern police command in Owerri. It's probably, besides this Edet house, I don't think there will be any other state command that will be better than that one from what I saw myself. Okay? Now, it takes the likes of governors, and they have been doing that. They have been trying to assist our security agencies, buying them operational vehicles, building infrastructures for them, but that's all they can do. They can't invest their money in training these police officers. The reason being that if you are sent to my state to come and spend 3 years, and I spend the state money to train you, and after training you, you're deployed to another state, I just wasted the money belonging to my state. But if those police officers are permanent in my state, and I know they are going to remain in my state, I can spend any amount of money training them so they can provide effective security in that state. So that is why you see people calling for state police. State governments, they don't send police to training. They can buy them operational vehicles, build infrastructures for them, because they know that those things are going to remain in their state, no matter what.
At this juncture, Mr. Johnson, we're just going to take a very short break. We're still going to get more of your thoughts on several of the security matters that are cropping up around the country. Our viewers, please do stay with us. Sunrise Daily, coming to you live from our Abuja studio. Standing by with me is a security analyst and a former captain with the United States Army, Mr. Bish Johnson. You know, we've looked at some of these issues. Of course, you've heard from some distinguished members of the Senate. What are your thoughts about, the performance at the moment of the nation's security chiefs?
Well, you see, the security chiefs, let me tell you something, Ajuri. You can only go to war with the army that you have, not the one that you wished you had. The security chiefs, no matter who they may be, can only function within the limit of the capacity that they have. I don't know how many brigades of soldiers that you have in Nigerian army. I don't know the total number of brigades. But I tell you, a brigade is mostly maybe about 5,000 soldiers. And out of those 5,000 soldiers, all of them are not combat arms. Some of them provide services, support services to combat arms. So out of that 5,000, you may be lucky, maybe 2,500, 3,000 of them are combat arms. And those are the ones you're going to see in the field carrying weapons and trying to enforce the law. And soldiers are not policemen. They are not there to enforce laws. There's a big difference between policing and soldiering. So the military is trying in its capacity, from what they have right now, to the best of their ability. So trying to put the blame on any one particular individual is not even the solution to the problem, because the service chiefs can only go to war with the number of troops and the number of equipment that he has.
Mr. Johnson, there's a famous saying that you cannot agree with anyone who is paid to disagree with you. When you look at what's happening in the country today, ahead of a very hot political contest for power in 2019, how much of what we see in terms of the inflammatory rhetoric, in terms of the ratcheting up of tension, in terms of even sponsored social media campaigns, is attributed to the politicization of this crisis and in a kind of a sponsored effort to ensure that there's as much crisis as possible ahead of the elections? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, this country has had that reputation of politicians trying to foment troubles when they see that, the existence of chaos and, is going to help them to win re-election. But I don't have any intel to that effect, but there have been cases in the past where it happened. So I can't tell you authoritatively right now that may be the case. But what I can tell you is that there are some elements of politics in what is going on in the country right now. There is too much political interference in the security services. Maybe we need to start looking at that angle as well. A situation whereby a policeman would actually want to do his job, and he gets a call, and they tell him it's a call from, from above, that he shouldn't do certain things, instead he should do the other. You are preventing them from doing their job. And if they don't do the right thing, all those things will have implication in the overall security of the country. So we need to begin to find a way to eliminate excessive political interference in security. Maybe we need to start looking at how all these service chiefs that we are talking about, maybe we can tenor their position such that once they have been confirmed by the Senate, you cannot remove them. So that way you will give them that confidence to be able to stay neutral and do their job to the best of their ability.
But that could also breed mediocrity, no?
Yeah, it can. It can. So that is why the president has to look for the best. It can't come from one particular part of the country, because when you have all the service chiefs coming from one particular part of the country, there may be a group think when in the process of decision making.
Captain Johnson, I think that's a fine place to leave it. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. As always, I thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you.
Standing by with me has been Captain Bish Johnson, a former captain with the United States Army. And at this juncture, we're going to take a short break. We will be back in a moment. Please do stay with us.